What up, folks? Welcome to Existential Sunday. Welcome to all of you who are watching the replay, which is most of you. Most of you watching this via replay on either Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook. Hello to all of you. Welcome. Hello to any of you that are coming in here live right now. Feel free to say hello in the comments, and I will come through in the comments and say hello. I'll say hello to you on the replay also. I just want to make sure that we're connecting with each other. If we don't know each other, my name is Corey, and I'm a husband, a father, a podcaster, a writer, a speaker. I sing some too, but I haven't sung in a while. Nandi, there will be no music on this particular Existential Sunday. But welcome to all of you. Welcome to every one of you who's watching this, wherever you're watching it. Feel free to do a couple of things. You can tag people in the comments that you want to experience this with you or listen to this, watch this. You can share this. You can share the YouTube link. You can share it on Instagram. You can share it on Facebook. You never have to ask my permission to do so. Some of you are already sharing it, so thank you. You're sharing it right away because you've been a part of these broadcasts and you're a part of this community of folks that's deconstructing and decolonizing our worldview and contending for a better world together. So thank you to all of you who are already doing so. Some of you might want to wait to the end because you're like, I don't know what you're going to say, and I'm not sure I want to share it. That's totally fine. You don't even have to share it. You can share or not share. Totally up to you. I just want to make sure you knew that you could do so. Also, if you would like to be a part of the Patreon community, you can do that also. There in the comments later, there'll be a link so that you can, or maybe someone's put it in the comments now on Facebook. I don't know about Instagram or YouTube, but I'll make sure that you can get access to that Patreon community if you would like to be a part of it. All right, I want to jump into what I would like us to take some time deconstructing this week. This weekend is MLK weekend. And I want to tell you what I remember from working at churches. Working at, for those of you that don't know, I come from the Christian tradition. And I spent several years working in predominantly white churches, white evangelical churches. And again, deconstructing still from all of that to try to find a better footing in the world than that one. Maybe that's something I should talk about someday. Because I don't know that I've really actually talked a lot about deconstructing what it means to me. And I'm not going to do that today because I don't have time to, but maybe next week. Anyway, coming out of that tradition, I can remember having the job of organizing the weekends and putting the services together. And I remember these pastors, the folks that I worked for, asking me what we had planned for MLK weekend. And it was like this thing that you just couldn't miss. And I remember feeling like, yeah, this is cool. I think it's a good thing that on this weekend, these white faith leaders felt a sense of responsibility or duty, I thought at the time, to make sure to not miss the moment of honoring Dr. King. And it seemed like a fairly new thing. But and to be honest with you, I think there may be churches to this day, predominantly white churches, that don't pause on MLK weekend to acknowledge it. Which is interesting. There's an argument to be made for both. But and with some of that I may get into today. To be honest with you, I'm not even sure if I will or not. I bring that up to say that this weekend is interesting around the Christian faith, around folks who claim to be Christians. And if you're watching this, you're not a Christian. I'm not about to do a Bible study or try to convince you to get baptized or anything like that. I'm just sharing an observation that I think will be beneficial for you also. I am trying to regain my train of thought as we speak. I find it interesting how the United States, a professed Christian nation, has taken the story and life of Dr. King and made it about racial reconciliation. That if you were to kind of sit with the average person of faith especially again, not all white, but especially white Christians, white people of faith, and you ask him and you talk about Dr. King, racial reconciliation would be one of those things, like that the races needed to come together, that people are people and everyone should just get along with each other, and there should be no division, there should be no fighting, there should be no back and forth. That Dr. King's mission was to make sure there wasn't any back and forth between people, that Dr. King wasn't about having arguments or disagreements or being disagreeable. Dr. King was just about peace, only about peace. In fact, the average Christian does the same thing to Jesus. Jesus was only about peace. That with Jesus, there was no sense of ethnicity or no like understanding of Roman occupation, any of those things. That Jesus was just about peace, despite the fact that Jesus literally said, "Don't think that I have come to bring peace but a sword." That's in here or there. There's like this concept that exists, that if you are a person who stares injustice in the face and calls evil what it is and names white supremacy what white supremacy is, names that Black Lives Matter, that you are divisive and that your apple has fallen far from the Dr. King tree. Especially any person of color who dares, whether that be in a boardroom, whether that be on a social media platform, whether that be in a blog, in an article, whether it be on the sidelines of a football game. If you are a person of color and you dare do something or say something that is offensive to whiteness, you and Dr. King don't have anything in common. You have more in common with Malcolm X, which is interesting. Because people who think that way, people who will present that as like their argument for race and not being divisive and not telling the truth about whiteness and the construct of whiteness that has been a poisonous, life-sucking, destructive force in the United States since its inception. If you talk about that, right, that you are Malcolm X, and it's interesting because folks don't even know what Malcolm X was about. Folks who talk like they don't even know what Malcolm X said. In fact, if I were to do a side-by-side, and if I do it now, you'll probably get it right. But if I did a side-by-side without this context that I just gave you, if I just said, here's a statement, who said it, Dr. King or Malcolm X? Most of you would fail that test. Most of you who look at people and say that they're being divisive when they start talking about race would fail that test because you don't understand why Dr. King did what Dr. King did. If you think for one moment that Dr. King and all of those brave young Black men and women, along with some white folks that were on that bridge, if you think those people walked across that bridge and got their ass beat to be reconciled with the people holding those billy clubs, if you think for one moment that they were crossing that bridge to go hug those police officers, I don't actually even know how to finish that. Like if you believe that that's what that was about, if you believe that the Montgomery bus boycott, the economic impact that the civil rights leaders organized during the Montgomery bus boycott to shut down the economy for that day was about hugging the bank, the mortgage officers, whatever. I don't know what the name is called. But, the people who decide who gets a loan or not. If you think it was about Black folks wanting to go in there and give those people who refuse them loans a hug, you don't understand the nature and the virtue of goodness. I have conversations from time to time where people, and I've had them for the last probably 5 or 6 years. I don't have them as much anymore, to be honest with you. But a conversation that I've been a part of several times is this, from white folks saying to me that there's a problem with the way that Black folks are going about reconciling with white folks. There's a problem with the way that we say things, a problem with the naming, the defunding the police. There's a problem with that as a slogan. There's a problem with Black Lives Matter, that statement alone, because there's a problem. And if you're ever going to be reconciled with white people, then you got to change the way let's pause for a second. Who said that our number one goal was reconciliation with white people? You said that. We are not advocating for reconciliation with white folks. Let me be very clear about that when I say that. This maybe some of you are a little uncomfortable when I say that. It's like, just hold tight. We are not out here. I am not in front of this camera speaking. I am not writing the things that I'm writing, putting the things on my podcast for reconciliation as a chief goal. And quite honestly, it's pretty arrogant of white folks to continue to put that burden on the backs of Black and brown people in the United States. That our job is, if we're going to preach at the conference, if we're going to speak at the church, if we're going to open up the Bible, if we're going to be invited to help the churches, that our job should be there about reconciling. No. Dr. King, one of the speeches that resonates the most with me is this speech. I don't know what it was called. I know it by All Here and Now, in which Dr. King made it very clear what his mission was about. Dr. King was talking about the freedom and justice for Black people in the United States. And in this speech, where he talked about all here and now, he talked about wanting all of our rights, not some of them. See, Dr. King would go back and forth to the White House and have conversations with presidents and government leaders, and he was watching as happens and continues to happen in the United States. He's watching the parsing of rights. Well, we'll give you this much. Like this, we'll give you, you can have the right to sit down at whatever restaurant you want to sit down at, but you can't vote. Oh, you can have the right to sit wherever you want on a bus, but you still can't drink from the water fountain. Or you can have the right to drink from the water fountain, but your kids still can't go to school with our kids. Or we'll integrate the schools, but we're still not going to we're still going to have neighborhoods where you cannot buy property, or your women will still not be able to vote. This is when Dr. King says all, he's like, we're not here and we're not like looking for some of the rights that the United States affords our white brothers and sisters. We are after all of those rights. And then Dr. King was like, here on this ground where we live. You know how many times in the last 4 years I have seen white folks say, if it's so bad here, then just leave. If the United States is such an awful place to Black people, to Colin Kaepernick, then why don't you just leave? Why don't you go back to Africa? Dr. King talked about wanting it here on this soil, that Black bodies were broken to build, that here in the United States of America, in Alabama, in Georgia, in Tennessee, in Florida, in Kentucky, in California, that here is where we want all of our rights. And right now, currently, there's a resurrecting of Marcus Garvey's idea of getting a boat and taking all the Black folks I guess all the black folks that want to come out of the United States. And the reason why that's an option, the reason why that is even a consideration is due to the fact that when we start having these conversations and naming the real stuff that's at the root of why we cannot have peace. I just put it on Facebook the other day when I said there can be no peace as long as there's white supremacy. And people were in the comments saying, yip, 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 yip. You know, yes, if you've been watching for a while, that's my sound that I make when someone's trolling or being stupid in the comments. Like, Corey, this is a divisive post. You can't be dividing people. Come on, man. Like, listen, if I can't name the thing that's keeping us apart, how could we ever come together? Again, let me be clear that the goal is not coming together first. Let me not get ahead of myself and jump to the now. All here now. Now. Like not later, not we'll get to it some other time. In the letter from a Birmingham jail, Dr. King talks about the white moderate and the white moderate's idea of time. That if the Negro would just be patient, time will fix it. Time will bring justice. That we'll just wait it out, which is a privileged thing to ask someone to do. I've been around white folks who said, let's just wait. Things are going to change this next generation. Let's just wait it out, because they don't feel the existential pain, burden, and sting of racism. So it's very easy for them to say, let's just wait it out. Not now. We got to do this first. We have to do this. We'll do this, and then we'll do this. We have to first do this other thing, and then we'll get to talking about race. But right now we got to do this. This is all race. Talking about race, talking about whiteness and white supremacy is always something that we can move to the side and do it later. It will forever be a do it later. And it's why Dr. King in his speech, All Here and Now, made an emphasis to say now. And now in 2021, we are still watching people act like this is a later conversation. Now, let me say why I strongly disagree with this notion and this idea that folks telling the truth, it's amazing to me. Maybe that's why Jesus said I didn't come to bring peace but a sword, and talked about turning mother against father and mother-in-law against daughter-in-law. Because maybe sometimes when we as human beings tell the truth, it's so uncomfortable that not everybody wants to hear it. Not everybody wants to sit with it. Maybe in telling the truth about America's history, when people hear how awful it is, they just can't deal. And they need to try to find a way to escape it. In fact, I can remember giving a talk once where I was telling the story about my father and how growing up, my dad had this sentiment that he shared with me and my brothers. And maybe you've heard this before. So if you've heard it before, oh well. But my dad would say that no matter how hard you work, how smart you are, how well you're dressed, how early you show up to work, in the eyes of white people in this country, this was my dad saying this to us in the 80s, you are still an N-word. I told that story in a talk, and I used the N-word several times on purpose. I'm not using it now on purpose, but I used it in that particular talk. It was the centerpiece. It was the thing that was supposed to make you feel that sting. There was a person in the audience, an older white gentleman, who pulled me aside later on and said that it was bad communication. I didn't know my audience, didn't know that a room full of white folks would be very uncomfortable with me saying that word. would feel very like awkward and uncomfortable and like, oh my God, let me, and literally said, he literally said to me, I was looking for the exits. Why? Like, and I'm not even like trying to be mean when I say why. Why? You were looking for the exits, sir. Because the truth carries a sword with it. Maybe that's what Jesus meant also when Jesus talked about, I came bring a sword. The truth has a sting to it that like it can be a purging, can be like a thing for healing, but like you got to be able to sit through it. If the ancestors could sit through being called the N-word, not just being named that, but because of that name, being treated like trash, worse than trash, then surely you in the United States, who's enjoyed the privilege of what that name has brought you, surely you can endure somebody saying that word to make a point about race. But when I tell the truth about race, I'm accused of being divisive. And I'm accused of being far from Dr. King. Let me be very clear with you again. Dr. King's number one goal was not racial reconciliation. Dr. King's number one goal, my number one goal, the number one goal of any of the folks that I feel very privileged to be associated with and friends with, the number one goal of the Black Lives Matter movement, the number one goal of the Hope and Heart Pills team, the Speaking of Racism group, the Check Your Privilege group, the number one goal of all of these groups and all of these people is freedom and justice for Black folks, for people of color. Without justice and freedom and equality and equity, what are we reconciling to? What are we coming in the room for? What are we sitting down at the table to discuss? What terms are there for me as a Black man where to sit down across the table from someone who wants me to be subservient to them based on the fact that I'm Black? Why would I sit down at that table? Why would I ever come to the table to only have more oppression, to return to slavery? Why? And if you're watching this and you're like, but we got to be reconciled. Okay, maybe we do have to be reconciled. But if you're watching this and you're white, especially a white evangelical Christian, and you're talking about racial reconciliation, that starts with you, my friend, not with me. That starts with you recognizing the construct that you were born into that absorbs too much space. Black folks haven't been asking to take away from white people. What we've been asking for is equality and justice. And this new pushback that we should be asking for racial reconciliation is a smokescreen to deflect from having to deal with the real thing, the real essence, the real destructive force. I talked about a little bit last week, our caste system that is this human hierarchy that puts people at the bottom and people at the top. And until the people at the top are willing to say, oh, wait a minute, my position is crushing other human beings. Until the people at the top are willing to do that and say, let's reorient our way of thinking and being, there can be no racial reconciliation. I want to, because I know this is potentially incendiary, I want to make sure I am telling you this so that my words, I'm clear about something. I'm clear about what I am saying. Sometimes people hear those kinds of words and think that put those kind of words on the same playing field as the words the president used that incited the violence that happened on January 6th, the insurrection that took place at the White House, and says that these words where I say there can be no reconciliation, uses that to say that it's the same as the dumbass, I'm sorry, God, I shouldn't call them dumbasses. I just got really upset. I'm sorry. Let me dial that back. They're not dumbasses. They're human beings who say stupid ass stuff. Over at Fox News, who continue even after January 6th to gas people up to feel like there is this boogeyman, this monster who's trying to harm them. Like, this is not the same as that. And here's why. I'm not calling people to arms. I'm calling people to protect themselves. In fact, when Malcolm X was talking about violent struggle, Malcolm X wasn't talking about storming the Capitol. Malcolm X was talking about violence to protect themselves, to protect his family. The Black Panther movement was about protecting the Black community. It wasn't about storming the Capitol as a revolution. It was about preserving and protecting Black life. And even that idea of preserving and protecting Black life was demonized. We weren't talking about attacking and taking. We were talking about protecting and preserving. And as I talk about, there cannot be peace, there cannot be reconciliation as long as there's whiteness. It's a statement of fact, not a threat. It's a statement of fact. It's a statement of truth. It is undeniable that where there is white supremacy, there cannot be peace, because white supremacy only knows how to be supreme, only knows how to take up more space than it should. So if you are pushed out to the margins and being pushed out so far that you're about to fall off a cliff, and you start pushing back against that, white supremacy is offended by that pushback, even though you and your family are about to fall off a cliff and die. White supremacy doesn't give a shit about you or your family. It only cares about whiteness. And because of that, there cannot be peace. Literally cannot physically be peace as long as there is white supremacy. Again, that's not a threat, that's a fact. Dr. King recognized this. Dr. King knew that. Malcolm X knew that. Ella Baker knew that. Rosa Parks knew that. So many folks from the civil rights era all knew that. Folks today, we all know that. And until we all can recognize and name that, hopefully this resonated with you. If you watched this for 27 minutes, and there, I will assume if you watched for 27 minutes, there was something compelling that you saw or heard. So maybe there's something made you mad. I don't know, whatever. As always, feel free to leave comments. You can add to, question, whatever in the comments. And those of you that are engaging in good faith, I appreciate you engaging in good faith. Those of you that I don't know how to even describe you, whatever. Just don't, I mean, if your comments aren't in good faith, don't expect me to reply to them. Like the dude who called me an idiot on YouTube last week. I think a couple people called me an idiot on YouTube last week. So, you can leave that comment if you'd like, but, we're not having a conversation. Grace and peace to all of you.